How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Tom.
It's very strange to have you here live in the show.
It's great to be here. The Globe and Mail in the green room is 18 months old.
I'm not surprised to hear that, you know? I think I saw a piece of paper there from a script I had for a guest before, and I think it was from like early 2020.
Sure. No, it is great to be here.
It is lovely to have you. So congrats on the book. I want to start this way, is that when you were getting the book together, you started to compare notes with friends and family about some of the memories in the book. How did that go?
That was great. That's, the book saved me during the pandemic. Like so many people, everything was pulled out from under me and I suddenly had no work. But I had this book, so I had a purpose. And part of that purpose was it was the perfect excuse to call up high school friends, old colleagues, people I've worked with in the past. And those conversations were wonderful. And because they had nothing to do, sometimes they went on for hours and hours. And it was really wonderful. It was a lifeline. And we laughed a lot. And that was kind of my purpose in writing it. I wasn't interested in writing anything that wasn't fun or funny. So I had a lot of laughs with a lot of people in preparing the book.
Tell me about growing up in Middle Cove.
Yeah, I taught in the book, I say I don't like to dwell too much on my childhood because it's too painful. Not for me, but for the reader who didn't grow up in Middle Cove with my parents and the pond down behind the house that you could skate on and swim in. Yeah. And we had a goat and a Newfoundland pony at one point.
Oh my God.
It was pretty idyllic.
It is the tourism commercial.
It is. And of course, in those days, it was what they called, unguided play or whatever. You would just, you just go out through the front door and you had your gang of buddies and you were just gone building forts and building race cars and having fires in the woods and playing games where you throw pocket knives at each other's feet. It was glorious.
So what is this story of when you were in grade 3 and all of a sudden your destiny is set out for you?
I was in grade 3 and I was being punished. And the way you were punished is that you would be placed outside the teacher's room. You weren't allowed to go outside for recess. So I'd glued my hand to my forehead to make Timmy Green laugh or something. And I was sitting in and I could hear the teachers. And they said there was going to be no classes that afternoon. And I was like, oh my God, no classes. And there's going to be the hippies in the van are here. I was like, there's hippies in a van. I didn't know what that meant. But we were all marched into the library and put on the floor, and there was a big blanket up on sticks, and suddenly there was a play, and it was Sheila's Brush, a famous Newfoundland theater company. I didn't know that at the time, but they came out, and suddenly it was like the most exciting thing I ever saw in my life. It was funny, it was scary, it was traditional Newfoundland jacktails is what they're called, and it was just so amazing. And then at one point, Andy Jones, who was the lead, said, "Are there any pirate children in the room?" And I was like, oh my God, yes, I'm a pirate, I'm a pirate, I'm a pirate. And then there was this little girl next to me going, I'm a pirate, I'm a pirate. And this horse came out to pick the child who would get to play the pirate. And I body checked that little girl out of the way and threw myself into the horse's jaws and got dragged up on stage where I got to perform as a pirate. And it was the greatest moment of my life. And backstage was the greatest thing I ever saw. And it was the first time I thought, wow, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Really? It was that clear to you? This is
the first thing I found interesting. I realized I was miscast as a child. I found dinosaurs interesting, but I wasn't going to memorize a PhD worth of information about dinosaurs or Tonka trucks or sports, or nothing really interested me until I accidentally stumbled into show business.
And was that a guiding light then for the rest of your life from then on?
Well, I took a bit of a break to have a poor scholastic career, but then I was in high school and I was really intrigued about the drama club. I say, in my day, we didn't have a gay-straight alliance, but we had the drama club. So I thought I'd give it a shot. And they did this play, and I didn't really like it. And so I was going to quit the drama club. And there was this teacher, Lois Brown.
Yeah.
And she said, you can't quit. It'll be the biggest mistake of your life. And I thought that was a little over the top. And I said, why? And she said, because the next play we're going to bring to the drama festival, the provincial drama festival. And I said, what's the play? And she said, I don't know, you haven't written it yet.
Oh, wow.
And no one had ever suggested that I could write a play. And she put this group of misfits in the library, and I would suggest that half of them were probably what they would call now at risk. And we created this play, and it had a punk band, and we said, bad words, and we, made fun of other schools and made fun of the principal. It was real rock and roll, and it was a little mini hit with the school. It was very exciting. And then we went to the drama festival, and we won the drama festival. And then a group of us inside of that group decided to start a comedy troupe and go out on our own and go downtown to the LSPU Hall and start doing comedy.
And was that because of the legacy of Cogco? Was it like Cogco leads to Corey and Wade's Playhouse?
Absolutely. That was the name of the company, Corey and Wade's Playhouse. And in Newfoundland, there was no stand-up. I never saw a stand-up or was in a stand-up club until I was an adult on the mainland. The legacy was Cogco. You do sketch. And so we were cocky. We were in high school. We were like, let's go downtown. We'll start doing sketches. Then we'll move to Toronto. And we'll become like Kids in the Hall or Codco and get a TV show.
Yeah, nothing to it.
Nothing to it. That's the way, that's how it works, right? It didn't work out quite like that, but that's what we started doing then for the next couple of years.
You end up working backstage at one of Kathy Jones's shows, and you meet someone who was very important to the rest of your life.
Yeah, Kathy Jones had this one-woman show, Wedding in Texas, which was brilliant. And Codco brought in a fellow by the name of Gerald Lunz to produce this show and bring it across the country. And in order to bring it across the country and to be cost-effective, you needed 2 crackerjack technicians. Kathy hired me and another young actor by the name of Sebastian Spence.
How old were you?
I would have been 18, 19.
Right.
I didn't have a clue about how to do any of the things that was required, but Kathy hired me because I was funny. I met Gerald. He was the stage manager and the producer. He thought I was the laziest, worst ever. He said he tried to fire me, and Kathy wouldn't let him, and he just thought I was the worst. And 2 years later, we ended up in a relationship.
Yeah.
He came back. Uh-huh. I was no longer working backstage, and we started a professional and a personal relationship. We've been together for well over 30 years now, and he's produced everything of any consequence that I've ever done right up through the Mercer report.
That's beautiful. Okay, so you were doing a little bit of film back then. I just love to get these stories off you. This reminds me, remember the early days of the pandemic where we would do this over Zoom?
Yes, yes.
You were getting some film roles back then. I want to play you a clip.
Never really want anybody around. You don't stop, you never win. You reach a point of momentum. Then you're trying to tear me up. Out of it up to here. I just want to be alone. I don't know you so dear.
Do you know what we're listening to there?
Yes. That is a film, a feature film called The Vacant Lot, directed by William McGilvery, and the credit said, and introducing Rick Mercer. And I played the lead singer of a punk band, and as you could see, it was a little bit above my pay grade. I couldn't really sing punk rock, even by punk rock standards, but it was very exciting to be in a feature film in Halifax. Yeah, I used to pick up a couple of those gigs when I was, 19, that age, 20, I guess.
I guess punk was more important to you than I ever figured before I read the book. Like it was sort of a guiding light for you.
That was the music we listened to, and I was blessed because I had an older brother that taught me that the Clash was the way to go and not Krista Berg. So my brother introduced me to the Ramones and the Stiff Little Fingers, and that, of course, led me to the friends that I hung out with in high school and junior high and high school. They were all in the punk music scene, and a lot of them were musicians, and it was really important.
Is that what led to you to become a little bit antagonistic towards authority and power and politicians and stuff like that in your early days?
Maybe, because punk was a bit of a philosophy, of course, and although it's not of a stretch to be anti-establishment or an angry young man when you're that age, especially in Newfoundland, I found. But yeah, punk rock was important. And that first show that we did in high school had a punk band called Waffet, which stood for Wada effing ugly truck, and they were a great band, and they were in our show. Like, how cool to go to the provincial drama festival. Everyone's doing like "Sorry, Wrong Number," and then we had a show with a punk band. It was so amazing.
Can we play another clip for you? Take a listen to this.
And then, of course, the lovely eulogy for the province appeared in the Saturday paper. Farewell to Newfoundland, penned by Charles Lynch, former chief of the Southern News Bureau. My only solace upon reading the article was the knowledge that somewhere in Mississauga, 10 or 11 drunken Newfoundlanders were loading themselves into the back of a ram charger preparing a search and destroy raid.
From 1990, the one-man play that puts you right in the center of a national debate. That's the clip from it, right?
Yeah, the show was called Show Me the Button, I'll Push It, or Charles Lynch Must Die.
You sound different there, Rick.
I do. Well, I'm slightly younger.
Yeah, right.
Maybe more affected. It was a one-man show that was about the Meech Lake Accord, of all things. And it was inspired by this guy, Charles Lynch, who was a very famous journalist who wrote a column that was, very insulting to Newfoundland. But when I launched the show, Charles took this ball and ran with it. He said, "Oh my God, there's this young man doing the show in Ottawa. He's declared a fatwa on my head. I'm the Solomon Rushdie of Newfoundland." And he started writing columns about my show. And then I went on midday here on CBC television and argued about the Meech Lake Accord. You had a man who was like 74 years old and a 20-year-old yelling at each other about the Canadian Constitution. It was peak CBC. And through the jigs and the reels, it's a bit of a long story, but that show ended up touring the entire country. I played Toronto for 8 weeks. I played Vancouver. I played Ottawa. I played Newfoundland. I toured Newfoundland. It put me in the national spotlight, in the theater community, in the comedy community, and led directly to the creation of this hour's 22 Minutes.
How was being in Ottawa, like that home of sort of Canadian political power back then?
Well, it was when Gerald and I started working in earnest together. Gerald was commissioned to bring in a one-man show from Newfoundland to Ottawa, and he asked 3 people before he asked me, because we were in a new relationship and we thought we shouldn't work together.
Yeah.
That never works out. Look at Sid and Nancy.
Yeah.
But then 3 people said no, and then he finally said, "You're always complaining about Brian Mulroney. Why don't you go to Ottawa and do a play about Brian Mulroney in their face?" And I was so young, I just didn't know any better. And I said, "Okay, I'll go. I'll do it, man." And
unbelievable, hey? Unbelievable that you would be able to do that at 20.
If I knew then what I know now about having to do a one-man show in the theater, I never would have done it. Sometimes when you're young, what you don't know is gives you an advantage. You say, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, I feel like I'm always trying to get back to that. You know what I mean? In everything I do, I'm always just trying to get back to that part of me when I was 18 or 19 or 20, and they were like, "Do you want to do a show on the CBC?" I was like, "Yes, no problem." You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Because you know too much now, and you know the consequences of failure now. And I just didn't know. And I was cocky, I guess, because I had no business doing a one-man show.
Yeah.
I had only been on stage for a couple of minutes at a time alone. And
how did it go? Did it go okay?
The show killed.
Yeah.
And then my big break happened with your predecessor, Peter Gzowski.
Right.
He heard about the show, and I got to go on the show. I was so young. Peter said, live on the radio like this, he said, "So what's the show about?" And I said, "Well, you'll have to come and see it." And I wouldn't tell him what the show was about because I was afraid I would ruin it. It was one of the worst interviews ever.
I would love to have someone on the show and be like, "Hey, thanks for coming on to promote your show."
Yeah, I refused to answer.
What's it about? You'll have to check it out yourself.
I wouldn't want to tell you that, Peter.
I hate to ruin the surprise. All right, so let's skip ahead a little bit. If you're just tuning in, by the way, my live guest this morning is comedian and Canadian TV legend Rick Mercer. Rick has a new memoir out called Talking to Canadians. We're telling a few stories from it. It's not that long before the big break happens on TV.
This hour has 22 minutes with J.B. Dixon, Frank McMillan, and Sydney Zavistinchek.
That's the original opening to the first season of This Hour's 22 Minutes.
Yeah.
And you had character names then. I forgot that.
We had character names. J.B. Dixon, I was. That was the, 4 very strongly opinionated, creative people were thrown in a room and told to create a TV show. It was a very raucous, fractious kind of birth. You win some, you lose some. And the one that I lost was that we used character names. And I didn't want to use a character name, but 2 of the people, Kathy Jones and Mary Walsh, of course, are brilliant character comedians. They're the most comfortable when they're in character.
Yeah.
So we had character names. But, hearing that opener, one of the greatest moments of my life, despite the fact that the 6 weeks leading up to the launch of 22 Minutes, I thought this show is destined for the rocks.
Really?
Oh, my God. We started with nothing except this proposal. No one really knew who wrote it. And it was like, there's going to be a country band every week, and they're going to sing songs from the headlines. I mean, how awful is that? There's going to be... there's going to be a monologue off the top about current events, but Kathy and Rick will do it. It was just a show I wouldn't want to watch.
Yeah, it felt like the proposal you describe in the book is sort of like a Canadian Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, except worse. And
with no money.
With no money. So then the four of us were put in a room and told to create a show. And somehow, miraculously, 22 minutes occurred. And that music makes me think of the day that I sat in this room and watched the pilot or the first episode of 22 Minutes. And I can't tell you how it felt because it was the greatest TV show I ever saw, and I was in it. I mean, you can't imagine what that felt like. I can remember thinking, oh my God, if I watched this show and I wasn't a part of it, I don't know what I'd do. And I thought this show could run forever. It's that good. Now, I was a little over the top, of course, but it's a pretty good first episode. And
it is kind of running forever.
It is kind of running forever.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I did it for the next 8 years of my life.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever bottled that excitement.
I think we talked about this before when you were on before, but when I was a kid, it was so exciting that all these people from Newfoundland, and I don't talk about this on the show very much, but I'm from Newfoundland.
Yeah.
And I keep that to myself.
Yeah.
It was so exciting to have all these Newfoundlanders on the show. And to me, it was just, that was the crew. It was Rick and Greg and Kathy and Mary. And only when I read the book and got to know you a little bit better and started to know sort of the history of Newfoundland art, that you were walking into a show with two really established people already.
Two.
Kathy and Mary on Codco were already big stars to you.
Oh, sure. Sure. When Codco premiered, I was in Montreal as a young man, and I walked into my friend's apartment, and Codco was going to premiere, and I was like, oh my God, I got to watch Codco. And I walked in, and their place had been robbed, and they were hysterical, and their stuff was dumped all over the place, and they were like, oh my God, we've been robbed, and this is missing, and that is missing. And I looked and I went, someone stole your TV. And they said, we don't have a TV. And I said, but Codco's about to come on. And they looked at me like I was the most insensitive person ever. And then I ran out the door and I ran to the bus station, and I watched Codco by pumping quarters in this weird pay-as-you-go television because it was such an important moment for me that I couldn't miss.
Yeah, and I should point out, I'll do my best here, but Codco are kind of like a Newfoundland Monty Python, like our defining sketch group of a generation, but also comprised of the first generation of Newfoundlanders to be born as Canadians for the most part, and very, very important to in some ways, there's no one more important to the development
and flash
of Newfoundland
forward,
theater.
I'm on a TV show with two of them. So two of them were legends in my mind.
So what do you do? How do you stand out with these legends on the show? You were this kid.
It was scary, but like I say, I was worried that the show wouldn't work. And so I came up with the idea for a rant, and I pitched the rant, and they went for it. Not because I think they thought, oh, we need to hear what this young man has to say every week, but it was the cheapest minute and a half in Canadian television. There was no makeup. There was no wardrobe. It was just me and a cameraman and the director, and we'd go down to the waterfront and run around for an hour, and they'd come back with 90 seconds. There was no sets. There was nothing. So it was cheap. And I honestly thought, as we were creating the show, that this show is going to end up on the rocks, but I'll have this tape of me doing this rant, not as J.B. Dixon, but as me.
Yeah.
And then I'll be able to take that tape and hopefully pitch another TV show that doesn't involve using characters.
Does life change overnight? Does walking down the street change overnight when 22 Minutes airs?
No, because I was 100% focused on 22 Minutes. Like, I never, ever stopped to even contemplate the fact that there was like 1.5 million people watching every single week.
Yeah, you're going into Tim Hortons and people would know who you were,
Sure. But again, there wasn't much time to go into Tim Hortons because we were just working. I mean, that's what we did.
So there's a moment, there's so many, I feel like every time you come on, I try to get some big story off you of that time. And there's one you tell here, which is a sort of a smaller story, but one I found really interesting, where you had been doing everything sort of from a distance. You had been culturally commentating from a distance. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you're in Halifax, you're doing 22 Minutes, and you have to go meet Preston Manning.
Yeah,
the head of the Reform Party at that point, right?
He was the head of the Reform Party. For the first well over a year of 22 Minutes, we never had a politician on because the politicians were all in the hallowed halls of Parliament Hill, and we were in 3 used Atco construction trailers in Halifax. Those two worlds never crossed. But Preston Manning came to town. He was the leader of the Reform Party, a large national figure, but not well known or in Atlantic Canada, certainly. This was before he was experimenting with contact lenses and clothes that fit. I mean, he was a real odd duck. And he came And so we thought, we'll go out and we'll shoot this rally. And then I put on a suit jacket and pretended I was there as a reporter. And then afterwards, I went up to him and I said, will you say this thing into the camera? It was so simple. It seemed so simple. I said, I'm just going to say, now that the election's over, will you appear on 22 Minutes? And he turned, as I asked him to do, and said, I will never appear on this hour's 22 Minutes, and stormed away. And the audience loved it because they'd never seen a politician on the show before, and Ottawa loved it. And Preston Manning had been called a lot of things up until that point, but nobody had said he was cool.
Yeah.
And suddenly he was on this cool show. And everyone in Ottawa noticed, and there was this seismic shift. And what immediately developed was this mutually parasitic relationship between the show and politicians. And sometimes it was a little cozy, and other times Mark Delahunty would go in and ambush them.
Yeah.
And it was a brutal lambasting from Mark Delahunty. And these people knew they had to take it because it was like the good housekeeping seal of approval. It meant you mattered if Mark came after you. But it was tough to sit through, for sure.
Just in the minute we have left here, the book ends just as the Rick Mercer report is getting up and running. That would go on to run for 15 seasons. You've won I believe, a gazillion Geminis for your TV work. I believe that's the real number. Officer of the Order of Canada. In writing this book, did you get any perspective on how Rick Mercer with the Newfoundland pony in Middle Cove went from there to here?
You realize that there's certain people you meet along the way, whether you know them for 30 years or 3 minutes or 3 days, that have a profound impact on the way your life turns out. And I always knew I was lucky. I've had some great lucky breaks.
Yeah.
But looking back, now I'm filled with gratitude in a way that I wasn't. And because I wanted to concentrate on funny stories and write a book that was fun, I realized what a good time I've had. And times that I'm really pleased to share with people because, like I say, I'm a lucky guy.
It's quite a book.
Thanks very much.
Nice to have you on.
It's great to be here in person.
I feel like having you on like every 6 months. We should just bring you on.
Let's make it 4.
Yeah. You know what? Every 2. We'll get you a cot in the back and you can have a nap. Rick Mercer's new book is called Talking to Canadians, a memoir. It's out now, right?
It is out today.